But glad to be here. I just want to say this as we move forward, and Jay kind of mentioned this in his prayer, is can we all just like say, we're over 2020. I think the reality is we've all faced our own challenges and our own struggles during this. If I hear the word unprecedented one more time, right? I mean, you're like, okay, let's stop. But we have. I mean, we've all felt like just the uniqueness probably in our own stories and our own lives of why it's been difficult, why it's been challenging, maybe why it's been frustrating. And so what I want us to do right now, just collectively, is give 2020 a sigh, like an exhale of I'm done, right? And so some of you haven't done this. Maybe you've like your mom or your dad, you've just been going, and you need to like together. So we're going to do this. This is permission for you to do this together. We're going to let out a big exhale on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, some of you are not very good participators, and Jay will deal with that later. And but no, that I mean, really, like this year, it's like, are you kidding me? Right? One thing after another. I'm sick of pivoting. I've heard pivoting again. Like I'm pivoting everywhere this year, right? And so I've told people in 2020 there are 2 things that got me through 2020. It's Jesus and it's memes. And I'm not lying. I love memes. I love memes so much that I'm actually going to create a Christmas book for myself of memes from 2020 that I love. I mean, they're just wonderful. So I thought Jesus, stability, anchor, memes makes me laugh. And so it'd be very disingenuous for me to come here and say that memes have got me through 2020 and not share a few of my favorite memes. So here, no particular order. Here's some memes. Here's the first one. Anybody? Anybody been there? If you haven't had anybody in your house with you, because I'm going to tell you, quarantine was like fun, awesome, exciting. Then you're like, I'm going to kill them, right? So here's another one. This is for me in particular. This isn't for you. This is for me. I was rolling into 2020 lean, just ready to rock, and then I'm looking a little more like Russell Crowe on the right as I get to the end of 2020. Here's another one. Hey, it's been rough. It's been rough on her as well. I mean, it has spared no one in 2020. Here's another one. If you haven't seen the movie, you don't get the reference. This is The Shining, yes, and again, this is kind of all the close quarters how we are. So here's another one. What are murder hornets, and how much toilet paper will we have to buy to stop them? People, please stop buying the toilet. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I mean, yeah. What's funny story. I'm at my in-laws for Thanksgiving, and I noticed they have like a toilet paper stash, and it's crazy. My thinking going, I want to take some before we leave. I mean, that's how what in the world is going on? Okay, anyway, we keep going. If 2020 was a bag of chips, you've probably seen this one, orange juice and toothpaste. I mean, it really has been a crazy year, and it's been like there's been so many moments this year where I've asked God, like, what is happening? Like, where are you? What are you doing? What am I supposed to do in relation to everything that I'm feeling and going through? And you may be able to relate to some of those words. And there's just been so much pivoting, right? So much change, so much exhaustion. And I think of emotional exhaustion. I think of spiritual exhaustion. I think of physical exhaustion. I just see so many people they're just fatigued by this year. And so as we look at this text that we're going to be in today, and you're like, Jeff, why are you talking about memes and all of this? It's because really, how does God interact with us in our challenging seasons? What does God say to us in our challenging seasons? How does God handle all our pivoting, all our struggles, all our seasons that are a little bit frustrating, exhausting, and confusing? And I think we've got a great picture of how God would handle us and what God would say to us in John chapter 11. And so if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn there. John chapter 11. or if you're like me and you've got it on YouVersion, go ahead and turn there as well. And as you're getting to John chapter 11, let me give you some background on what's going on in this passage. Word has been sent to Jesus that his friend Lazarus is very sick. And Lazarus is Mary and Martha's brother, and all three of them are very close to Jesus. All three of them are followers of Jesus. And they live at Bethany at this time, and Jesus is a full day of travel away from Bethany when he gets word. Now, Bethany, which is close to Jerusalem, is in a region called Judea, and just previously, Jesus almost got stoned. People were picking up rocks, trying to throw them at him, to kill him, to get him out of there. So this is the area that Jesus just left, where Lazarus is, and I'm sure that, his disciples were probably like, Jesus, this probably isn't a good spot to go back to. We just escaped death. Please tell us we're not going back to this area. And Jesus gave them their wishes for a couple days. And then he said, hey, we're going to go back to see Lazarus in Bethany. And that's when they leave on their journey. And that's where we're going to pick up in this text in John chapter 11, verse 17. It says this: on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. So obviously, in the time that Jesus found out that Lazarus was sick, he has died. And he has been dead for several days by the time that Jesus gets there. And we hear this in verse 21. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Now, Martha's words are very raw and very honest in this text. I mean, she expresses what every one of us had felt at some point in our lives, and we'll actually see and realize in verse 32 that her sister Mary expresses the exact same thing. And we feel the depth of Martha's loss and pain in those words. If you had only been here. We sense her feelings that Jesus was late, right? That he did not move quick enough. And probably at some weird level to her, that Jesus messed up. That these events that have happened, the pain that she is feeling is because Jesus was slow and didn't show up on time. If you had only been there, my brother would not have died. If you had only been there, I wouldn't have to answer all these friends of mine where my Jesus was, this guy that I've followed, the guy that I've told them about the miracles, and here I am with a brother that he knew was sick, and now he's dead, and Jesus, where were you? Can you relate to those cries and those pleas to God? Have you ever felt that? Have you ever had a moment in your life where you thought something similar? If you had only been there, God. If you'd only been there, my marriage wouldn't have ended. If you'd only been there, I wouldn't have lost that job. If you'd only been there, my finances wouldn't be a disaster. If you'd only been there, my relationships wouldn't be reeling. If you'd only been there, my kids wouldn't have run away from you. If you'd only been there, my health wouldn't be poor. My loved ones would still be here with me if you had only been here. Author Philip Yancey writes that when we find ourselves having those if you'd only been there moments, that we're actually asking 3 questions. God, are you there? God, do you care? And God, can you do anything about it? And I think that at the core of our questions and our pain, we're wondering, is God present in our pain? I mean, has he abandoned us? Has he just left us to deal with this on our own? Has he just dropped us in 2020, right? And he's nowhere to be found. Important verse I want you to wrestle with this morning, and kind of really sets up what we're about to see through the life of Jesus, is Hebrews 1:3. And the writer of Hebrews says the Son, speaking of Jesus, is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. Now, this is important because as we look at this passage, I want us to understand that as we look at Jesus, it is the exact representation of God. So how would God respond? Look at Jesus. What would God say? Listen to Jesus. How would God deal with me in the place that I find myself? Let's look at Jesus. Understanding that Jesus is fully God and fully man, that God's heart is accurately represented in Jesus' life and Jesus' words. And as we look at this in this text, and we look at Jesus in this moment with Martha, I think we can confidently conclude that Jesus is present in our pain. Jesus is present in our pain. He doesn't exit stage right when things go bad in our lives. He doesn't run away from our pain. There may be others that run away, but Jesus is not one who runs away from us in our pain. He enters into our pain if we'll let him. And what's interesting is what Jesus didn't do in this exchange as well. He didn't walk away. He didn't roll his eyes at her, right? He didn't ask one of the other disciples to deal with her as she's probably very emotional and in despair. He didn't do that. He didn't chastise Martha for her honest words. He didn't shut her down. He stayed. He listened. He was fully present. And what I love about this is it tells us that Jesus can handle your words. Jesus can handle your doubts. Jesus can handle your despair. Jesus can handle your questions. Jesus can handle your frustration. Jesus can handle your exhaustion, right? Jesus wants to be present in your pain. Even when you can't sense him. That song, Waymaker, speaks to that. Even when you can't sense him, he wants to be present. Even when you can't feel him, even when you can't see him at work in the obvious, in or around you, he wants to be present in your pain. Even when you can't see the finish line, even when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you can be assured and confident that Jesus is present in your pain. Now let's keep tracking. Verse 32 of John 11. It says this. It says, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, here's these words again, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Verse 34, where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Verse 35, Jesus wept. Now, if you're trying to do a scripture memory challenge for 2020, this is your verse. Start with this one, right? Shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. Verse 36, then the Jews said, see how he loved them. And I think, see how he loved them. I mean, and we'll talk about this in a bit, but this emotion is brewing on what he has seen before him. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said this, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Now, the powerful collection of verses there, honestly. I mean, we could just sit in those verses for the next few weeks. I mean, there's so much there. But what I love about this is these verses profoundly communicate the humanity of Christ. The heart of God made visible through Jesus in that moment with Mary and Martha. Now, what I love is that Jesus didn't impede this family's grieving. He didn't get tissues and say, hey, stop this. There's no need. He didn't do that. You don't see that in this text. You don't see him minimize or dismiss what they're feeling. Instead, he joins them. Verse 33 said that he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. The word troubled, when it's strictly translated, means really angry. He was irate. He was in a holy way. It's hard for us to hear that word and to think in a holy, righteous way. But you have Jesus, the Son of God, fully man, fully God, angry at what he is encountering. Because he is encountering deep sorrow. He is encountering heartache of his friends. He is encountering human pain. And for him, that made him mad. I mean, think about it. The Son of God is staring down in this moment the consequences of the fall of man. He is staring down as he is looking at not only someone who has died, but he is looking at really the rubble of death and what that brokenness and that pain in this world causes those, and these are those he loves, seeing the wreckage of that right before him. And he was deeply moved by it. Now, not only is Jesus present in your pain and in our pain, but Jesus is moved by our pain. He is moved by your pain. And maybe for some of you, that's the first time you've ever heard that. That's the first time you've thought about it, is that the humanity of Jesus sometimes is disconnected from the reality of our faith, is that Jesus is moved by your pain, by your struggle, by your heartache, by your loss. Romans 12:15, the Apostle Paul says this, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. And Jesus in this moment is doing that very thing. He is weeping, crying uncontrollably with those who are weeping. And on the verge of Jesus' greatest miracle and Jesus' last sign in the Gospel of John, he was overwhelmed by feelings of grief and loss and wept with them. Now, I want you to hear this morning, please. And again, many times we disconnect the personal when we talk about these texts. We come to church, we check in, we check out, we do our thing, right? And many times we don't like to take the personal application to our lives. Listen, he weeps with you. You. When was the last time that you were broken, that you wept? When was the last time you had heartache and loss and you were at a point that you couldn't even articulate? Listen, Jesus wept with you. Jesus hurt for you. Jesus was not only present in your pain, he was moved by your pain. He weeps when you weep. He hurts when you hurt. He is able to sympathize with your pain and with your weaknesses. And this passage in John 11 helps us understand more accurately what the writer of Hebrews was saying in Hebrews 4. It says, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. We do not have a high priest, Jesus, who doesn't get betrayal, who doesn't understand heartache, who doesn't understand loss. He was here. He did walk in our shoes. He walked on this earth. He understands. He can sympathize with our weakness and with our pain. And with those tears, Jesus says, I mourn with you. With those tears, he says, I understand. With those tears, he says, I'm sorry that you're going through this. You are not weeping alone. You are not hurting alone. Jesus is present in your pain, and he is moved by your pain. Let's continue. Verse 38. It says this. Jesus, once more deeply moved, which again, I love it. Again, the humanity of Christ there. Once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Verse 39, take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he's been there for 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? It's very interesting to read that Martha protested at removing the stone. I mean, she had some faith, right? But in that moment, and there was obvious odor. Like, I mean, most of us wouldn't say, hey, go into this room. It stinks really bad. Enjoy, right? I mean, that's not our normal. So, I mean, she's very aware of just the practical and the physical elements that are going on there. But I believe there had to be just a hint in Martha's hesitation, a hint of unbelief, a hint of doubt, a hint of her trying to protect Jesus, what was behind that rock, right? Like, Jesus, like, it's too late. It's been 4 days. It's too late. He's too far gone. I mean, most people that day, they knew dead people stayed dead, right? So, like, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you making the journey, but it's too far gone. There's nothing you can do with my brother's body that's in the tomb. I mean, we've already buried him. Dead people stay dead. Let the rock stay there. You know, I've read this passage several times. But just recently, it really hit me, those 3 verses there, about the personal application of my own life and how I can relate with Martha. Because a lot of times, I close off God from my weaknesses. I shut God off from my pain, from the difficult experiences that I'm feeling or that I've went through. I'm like, God, you don't want to see that. Like, I don't know if you can handle it. I don't know if you can do anything about it. So I'm just going to block the entrance and let's just move on. Let go do some miracles somewhere else. Go meet with someone else, but not here, not me, not now. Right? And I think about our lives, and many of us, same way, we cover up the tomb, right? We're like, God, you can't handle the pain that it's in me. You can't handle the pain that I've experienced. You can't handle my questions. You can't handle my doubt. God, it stinks in there, right? It stinks. It's tough in there. I'm not sure you're ready for this. I think there are quite a few reasons why we don't let the light of day or the light of Jesus fall upon what's behind that tomb. I think for some of us, our pain has become our fuel, like our driver, our motivator, and in many cases it enrages us to do better, to achieve, right, to prove people wrong. I think for some of us, our pain has become our justification. We've used it for years to justify harmful, destructive decisions that may be reckless or against God's will for our life. I think for some of us, our pain has become our identity. We're defined by it. It's been around so long, it's just like a friend. We're even known for it. And unfortunately, we've gotten comfortable with that label that our pain has slapped on us, and we just continue to live in it. I think for some of us, our pain has become our secret. And that secret has brought on shame and guilt, and it's shackled us from living a free life. It's shackled us from living a peace-filled life. I have two children, Camden and Carter. Camden is 12 years old, and Camden's 15 years old. Sorry, Carter is 12 years old. And it's funny, and if you have kids, you know this, it's funny to watch when kids get hurt, how they handle pain. They're totally so I have Carter, he's a runner, and you may be able to relate to that. If he stubs his toe, if something hurts, he just starts running. I do that, so I kind of relate to that. I'm not sure what that, maybe the exertion of energy just running around helps the pain to go away. I remember when I was a kid, I used to run around the living room just screaming when I was hurting. Now Camden, my daughter, is a hider. And so when she gets hurt, she leaves somewhere and in her room, wherever, away from people, and just cries and hurts alone. And I'll never forget before a church event, right before we were about to leave, Camden, my daughter, she's about 9 or 10 at the time, steps on a garden tool and slices her foot open. It was bad. It was bad. Now, what makes it worse is Camden is a hider. So she's running off, disappearing, and then we finally find her, and she has the slice covered, and she will not let us see it. Just gripping her foot, saying, just crying, bawling. And I'll never forget what I told her. As I said, Camden, we cannot help you unless we see the wound. We cannot get you where you need to get and do what we need to do for you unless you uncover what's been cut. And I think about us, whether you're a runner or whether you're a hider, is for some of you for so long, you will not allow Jesus to see the pain of your past or the pain of your present. And you're like, no. Carry on, right? Carry on, Jesus. Move on. Nothing to see here. But what if we allowed him to see what's in the tomb? What if we gave him access to the pain in our life? And for some of you, you blocked it out for so long, and you're like, man, it's really stinky, right? It's been there a while. And Jesus is saying, let me see it. I can't heal what I can't see. I can't help you to take a step forward if I don't see what's in there. And here's a question for you. What's in the tomb for you? What have you been covering up? What are you afraid or embarrassed to show Jesus? Will you let him see it today? You see, Jesus' power is demonstrated in our pain. And it can only be demonstrated and it can only be experienced if we allow him to see it and we invite him into it. Let's continue. John chapter 11, verse 41 says this. So they took away the stone, Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Verse 45, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. I love this for so many reasons, but the main reason I love this is because Jesus is giving them and us a picture of his resurrection, a picture of his resurrection power, which, get this, is a picture for us of the possibilities. It's a picture for us of what could be. It's a picture for us of what his power can look like and what it can do even in our pain. And so what we find in this moment with Lazarus is Jesus is foreshadowing his own death and resurrection. And he's given us that snapshot of what he is capable of, even in the midst of our mess, even in the midst of 2020, right? Even in the midst of our struggle, even in the midst of our exhaustion. Because many of us were like, Jesus, I'm too far gone. This is too far gone. I'm beyond your reach. This is outside of your scope. And what we see in those verses is no one is. Nothing is. Jesus demonstrates his power in our pain. When I was on my way back from Las Vegas, I was there for 6 years, and we moved back in 2010 to start a church. And on my way back, I got a call from a buddy of mine that has really let me know what's going on in his life. And on that day that he called me, an affair that he had had for about a year and a half had been found out. And he was sharing with me what's happening. And obviously, as I'm coming back to Tulsa, I'm like, I want to meet with you. I want to connect with you. Now, it was one of those moments, and you've probably had these, when you know you're going into a conversation and you're like, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I have no idea what they're going to say. I don't know. It was just one of those moments. And I remember going to him and us beginning to talk. And I don't know what, I was kind of expecting maybe like humility, a little more apologetic posture. And it wasn't. It was more angry at the world, angry at his wife, more justifying, more dismissive, more minimizing. And this is, a really good friend of mine with a really good heart. And I'm just like, what is happening? What is happening? And his anger began to transfer to me, and I became angry. If you've ever been that, you're like, I wasn't angry, but now I'm angry because you're angry, so I'm going to match your anger with my anger. And I remember leaving there that day. And it was definitely one of those, like, only God could do this. But even with that statement, I would never say it out loud, but probably like, this is over, right? That's where I was. And so we left. We continued to stay connected. And truly all I can say is something supernatural happened within him. He was broken. He was contrite. He came to a place where he owned it. He came to a place where he wanted to do whatever it took to reconcile with his wife. And by God's grace, she was there too. And so it's crazy. From about 12 to 18 months, you see this process that looked like no way to wow, there may be a way to wow. He got counseling individually. She did as well. And they began to get some counseling together. And honestly, God's hand and God's power was all over that mess and all over the pain and the wounds that each of them were carrying and that each of them had. And it truly was an only God. Now, you may be saying, why is this testimony relevant to me? Let me tell you why it's relevant. Their marriage was dead. Their marriage was lifeless. Their marriage was too far gone. But the resurrection power of Jesus, you can have hope. That same power that resurrected their marriage is the same power that can resurrect whatever in your life is dead and you believe is too far gone. You see, Jesus gave us a picture of the resurrection through Lazarus walking out of that tomb, coming back from death to life. And what he is saying to you and what he is saying to me this morning, nothing is hopeless. Listen, nothing is too far gone. Nothing is beyond my reach and my power. My power is demonstrated in your pain. My power is demonstrated in your dead ends, right? My power is demonstrated in your struggle, in your seasons of doubt, in your seasons of exhaustion. My power rises up, is made perfect in your weakness and in your places where you think there is no way. God says, time out. Did you not see, not only did Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead, did you not see me raise Jesus from the dead? All things are possible because of that. And for some of you this morning, you're like, Jeff, you don't know the situation or you don't know the pain. Because some of you, there's pain from decades ago, and you're like, you don't know. And I truly believe this is Jesus saying, listen, my grace is sufficient. My power is greater than your pain. My grace is sufficient. My power is greater than your past. My grace is sufficient. My power is made perfect in your weakness. And whatever's behind that tomb, I can take it. I can redeem it. I can do the miraculous. I can do the only God stuff, but you got to let me see it. You got to give me access to it. And for some of you, there are dead dreams in your life that God's like, I want to resurrect them. For some of you, you are passionless, and God is saying, I want to resurrect the passion that I placed in your life. For some of you, you're like, my marriage is at the end of its rope. And God's saying, I can resurrect your marriage. For some of you, your heart and soul are dry, and it has been a parched land for several months. And God is saying, give me a shot. I can breathe life into your soul and into your life. For some of you, you're like, Jeff, I haven't had vision, any kind of spiritual vision for my life or my family or for any kind of career in a long, long time. And God is saying, give me a shot. Let me behind the tomb. I want to give you vision again. I want you to see the world through my eyes again. You know, John 11:25 and 26 says this. Jesus said to her, and this is Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? And obviously, Jesus has given the promise of resurrection, the promise of eternal life, the hope of heaven for those who believe. But I also think he is saying that dead things can become life. Old things will become new. Broken things can be restored. Ruined things can be redeemed. And I have to ask you this morning, what in your life needs resurrection? What in your life do you think is too far gone? What in your life do you believe is beyond God's reach? Who in your life do you think is too far gone? What in your life do you think is too late for Jesus to do anything about? You know, it's interesting, the question, do you believe this? And the word belief, it actually means to fully place your trust in something or someone. And this belief is, do you trust, not in the plan, not in the process, but in the person of Jesus Christ? Do you believe that he can do what he says he can do? Do you believe that he can do what you've seen him do? And for some of you today, you're like, Jeff, I've been following Jesus for a long time. I've heard this text preached many, many, many times over. So maybe for you, it is not a step of faith into salvation. But maybe for you, it is a step of faith to give Jesus those dead things and those dead areas of your life that you've been hiding from him for a long time. For some of you, it may be giving him the pain that maybe you're in right now, that you have been ignoring, that you have been numbing, that you have been coping with. And maybe right now, your belief, your step of belief is saying, Lord, I trust you with this pain right now. For some of you, it's just to invite him into your mess. Invite him in. The mess of your thoughts, the mess of your life, the consequences that maybe you're dealing with, to invite him in. You know, the second part of Hebrews 4, and I think we'll have it on the screen here. It says, after it talks about that Jesus can sympathize with us, right? He gets us. He understands what we're going through, what this world brings our way. It says, let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence. so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. And this is where we're landing. Some of you need to approach. We've seen who God is through the life of Jesus. We've seen God's heart through the life and words of Jesus. Let you then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that you may receive mercy and grace and find grace to help you in your time of need. Maybe today is the day where you just take that step and say, I'm approaching today.